Welcome to the RC Roundtable podcast, where we discuss the latest RC hobby news, events, model reviews, and a whole lot more.
Are we going to pretend that didn't happen?
Man, if you only knew what happened behind the scenes. We had a little technical error here, and hopefully it works this time.
We had like 4 hours. We were just talking. And...
I know. We solved cancer and cold fusion, but now it's all gone because
the Middle East, we had it all figured out.
Yep. You didn't hit the right button.
All right, round two. Democrats were hugging.
All right, let's try this again. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the RC Roundtable, episode number 176. And because our indomitable Lee Ray is not here, yes, that guy up in the top right corner is not Lee. That is Bob Martin, our special guest for today, the RC Sub guy from Nautilus Drydocks. And he has gloriously and generously agreed to join us today for a really special topic that it should be a lot of fun to talk about.
I think thanks for joining us. Absolutely. Anytime.
Fantastic.
Fitz, you need to thank me. Because I screwed up when we had to start the recording over, you got the website right on the first try now.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't mess up his website. Well, at least I get a blind squirrel gets a nut.
Something like that.
Every once in a while. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get right into it. Before we get real heavy with Bob here, let's talk about a couple of things we want to get off our chest real quick. Terry has a great story with his little, what was the name of that plane? I can't remember what it's called.
The high-tech Hawkeye.
Yes.
So I know Lee has one too. He and I have been talking about it as I went through the process with mine.
You do some racing.
So, what about racing?
He's coming up there. Ask him to bring one with you and do some racing with him or something.
Oh, yeah, we could.
Or combat.
It wouldn't be very fast racing.
Yeah, that's okay.
So for those of you watching, you can see it here. For those of you listening, it's a little, I don't know, what's the span on this thing? 20-something inches? Low 20s?
25, something like that?
Yeah, it's a little guy. I think it weighs like 4 ounces, ready to fly. This is a receiver-ready plane that High-Tech used to sell. I don't think they do anymore. My daughter won it at the Neat Fair a few years ago, and we hadn't put it together. And we decided to do that over the weekend, or I should say, I decided. She doesn't know it, but she gave it to me. And so I thought it would be a quick job, and it was. And the interesting part here is I used the same transmitter that I used in my float plane that I talked about from the Neat Fair a few years ago. And for those of you that remember the story, I'm talking about the incident where I maidened a plane. Halfway through the maiden, the transmitter battery died, but lucky me, it just orbited over the lake. And then at some point, somebody grabbed a battery, and we recovered it and landed without incident. And I thanked my lucky stars. So you would think that I learned from that incident, right? Nope. I'm stubborn and I'm kind of dumb. So I used that same transmitter again here, and I took it out for a maiden flight, and everything went great. It flew well. It had decent power, and this is a 3-cell airplane, rudder, elevator, throttle, and it was maneuverable enough with that. But after that first flight, I'm like thinking to myself, I want to add ailerons, and I want to give it some more power. So when I got it back home, I cut in some ailerons, added 2 more servos, bada bing. And I also modified the receiver, took the case off, wrapped it in heat shrink, and saved about half the weight. So that helped too. And that kind of offset some of the added weight of the servos.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. Yeah.
And I also put it on a watt meter. Oh, I forgot this part. The connectors between the speed control and the motor, it has a built-in brushless motor, servo connectors, like 3-pin servo connectors.
Yeah.
What's the amp rating on those things?
A couple amps.
0 point nothing.
Yeah.
It can't be much. So I decided I would direct solder that. So I soldered the motor to the ESC. I swapped out the red JST battery connectors for XT30s and put it all on a watt meter, and It's designed for a 2-cell, but I found that a 3-cell, 350 milliamp hour LiPo doesn't overstress any of the components. It's within spec for the speed control, and the motor seemed like it was doing good. So thumbs up on all that. Took it out for another flight after making all those mods. And long story short, a couple minutes into the flight, it stopped responding. Luckily, it came down to a gentle landing in the field with no damage. But the reason it stopped responding is because the idiot holding the transmitter let the battery die again. I had, at some point I had turned off the warnings in the transmitter that tell me, hey, idiot, the battery's about to die. Because I had changed out the battery. It used to be a lithium phosphate, and now it's got a lithium ion. So maybe in the course of changing out the battery type, I turned off the alarms. I don't know. But it has them on now. I've got every alarm this transmitter is capable of is enabled now. So when the battery's getting low, it sends smoke signals. It calls my mother. It does all sorts of stuff to let me know that I better land and take care of things.
Nice.
So
those little flags. What are those little flags?
Right.
There's a name for them. Oh, I always forget what they're called. But
it gives me a little shock. So that's the story behind my handle. For those of you listening, my handle tonight is repeat offender. So I like to think 2 strikes and I'm out. So I learned my lesson. It won't happen again. I swear.
This is one of those things, though, that if this wouldn't have happened, you just would have kept on going until it was a serious issue. So these kind of things happen for a reason. It was just a little lesson.
The universe needed to remind me, and It did it in the nicest possible way with a cheap airplane that it didn't even damage. So I did something right. Somebody up there likes me.
So. Yes, because third time you would have. It's going to end up in pieces, whatever you're flying. So.
Yep. So that'll really make it stick. So all right. So that's my flying story. What's yours?
You reminded me, I once had an incident where I was many moons ago, we were flying with NICADs. I was flying an airplane, and I had just touched down to land when the battery on board died. Oh. And so I was really lucky. It just landed. It was a glow-powered plane. I just landed, and it maybe, taxied a couple of feet, and then I had no control of anything, and it just sat there.
The transmitter or the airplane battery?
The airplane battery.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, airplane battery died. I guess it was worn out or bad cell or something like that.
Yeah, that's not as good as the one where the battery fell out of the airplane, but you have to be able to top that story now.
I will never top that one.
So,
Bob, we're referring to a case where I was flying a large airplane and the battery literally fell out. I did a roll, I think, with it, and the battery came unstuck from the Velcro and it literally fell out of the plane. But the great thing is the motor freewheeling was enough power, could generate enough power to run everything for me to land it. So it didn't crash.
He didn't even know the battery had come out until he couldn't taxi off the runway.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
I thought the canopy had come off. Actually, the canopy, it did come off, and I thought that was it. And so it had retractable landing gear, had electric retract landing gear. So I dropped the gear, came right in and landed normally. It was a little tail heavy, but it landed normally. And then it wouldn't taxi. I said, well, that's odd. The motor wouldn't run. I walk up to it. The battery's gone. And that battery ran everything.
Yeah. So I apologize because I'm not intimately. I'm a pilot, but I'm not an RC pilot. So the prop was acting as a generator. It was back feeding the system with electricity. Correct. Interesting. That is so cool.
It was the right combination of the prop pitch was coarse enough to freewheel, but not too coarse, not too fine. The motor was big enough to generate enough power to run the servos, and the speed controller had the brake disabled and had a rectifier in it to feed power back into the battery. It was just like the perfect storm of everything. It worked. It was absolutely amazing. Yeah. Because normally you just crash because you run out of power.
Well, and then too, I mean, I guess they do it on purpose, but they would probably put the battery, on the CG, I would imagine, or close to the CG, right?
Yeah, I was lucky in this plane that losing the battery, it was close enough to the CG that it was still able to fly. You
said it was a little tail heavy.
It was a little bit tail heavy. I could tell it flew a little funky, but I figured it was just because the canopy was missing. But No, it was a big enough plane that the shift in CG wasn't enough to lose the control.
And that's another lucky thing. For most of our models, I think the battery is critical for CG. So with 90% of planes, if you lose the battery, it's not flyable anymore.
It was a big chunk of battery too. It wasn't a little battery.
And it's an asymmetric plane, so you had lateral and fore aft balance.
Yeah.
So anyway,
it was a BV-141. If you know what that is, we can look it up. So anyways, speaking of airplanes, so I had a little interesting flying maiden the other day. So at our club, we had a couple of guests that popped up. They were students at the local university. I think one, he's going for his master's now. I think he just finished his bachelor's. And they were building an airplane for the AIAA competition. They call it the Design, Build, Fly, if I remember correctly.
Isn't that already over?
It's already, yes. That's I'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
So that's very much akin to the SAE aero design in a way, where they have to design an aircraft with certain rules and limitations and lift a certain amount of weight and that kind of stuff. So him and his compatriots have been working on this for quite some time, and they missed the deadline. They were not able to complete it in time for the competition. But he came to the club and said, hey, we built this plane, but this is our first plane we've ever built. We've never flown it. We'd really like to see if it even flies. That way we can use some lessons learned for next year. And that way we can finish it faster and learn from any mistakes and stuff like that. We just want to see if the thing flies. It's our first airplane. We designed it. Can you help us? Help us, OB Club Kenobi. So we said, sure. So myself and our club president, Michael Eibel, said, hey, we'll help you out. He said, hey, Fitz does a lot of electric stuff, and the club president is actually an aerospace engineer, so and a model airplane pilot. So he said, hey, we'll put our heads together and check it out. And so he brought it to the club meeting, and it was a pretty neat design. It's something pretty basic. In fact, let me show up a picture here real quick.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to try to make you the bigger picture here, but clearly I don't know how to do that. Where's Lee when you need him? How do you
just wanted to make yourself bigger.
Yeah, I play dumb.
Well, let me where is it? Oh, window. There we go. Can you see that?
Yes. Do you want me to add it? Okay, let me add that to the stream. There we go.
Oh, there you go. It's big now. So here it is. I can't remember the wingspan. It's fairly large, probably pushing 80 inches of wingspan. And it's very interesting. It's a mixture of carbon rods and traditional laser cut balsa wood, and some 3D printed parts in the tail and stuff. And it's got a really nice motor, runs on a 6-cell battery pack with a folding prop. The rules were it has to be able to be disassembled and put in a box of a very constrained dimensioned. So it can be disassembled, the tail can come off, the wings can come off, and that kind of stuff. And it has a cargo bay for lifting weight. And so we took a quick look at it, and one of the first things we checked out was the CG, and it was way tail heavy. So if you look closely, you can't really see. Do you see my mouse?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, okay. You can barely see it, but you see a little white patch right there?
Yep.
That is lead weight that we literally taped to the nose. And there's the one on the other side, and he had some in the middle. So we told him it was tail heavy, so he put some inside, but it still wasn't enough, and so he had some extra weight, and we just basically duct taped it to the front. And we figured, okay, that seems pretty good, and so it flew. We took it off. I don't know if this is that. I have a video. I don't know if this was. Sorry, I'm clipping around. So we went to the field and we did a little taxi test. And this is not the flying video. Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry. Let me load up the other video real quick. It's got to load for a second. We had a bit of a crosswind that day, so we're taking off in a weird way.
Do you still have the crosswind runway set up there?
We do, but it was like 90 degrees off of that one. We couldn't use that particular crosswind. It was actually quartering from a different direction. I got it up here in a second. All right, window here.
All right, so
and you should have it in a second.
there it
we go.
is.
Okay. So here's a quick clip of it taking off. It took off. It didn't have much weight in it, so it took right off. And it actually flew quite well. I was actually surprised how well it flew, considering we didn't really know how much throws to put in it. And so we had different rates and a little bit of differential in the ailerons. You can't really, it's a spec at the moment. But anyway, so it did. Let me see the landing, if I can get it. See if James got the landing. Okay, here it is coming in for a landing. We found that it actually flew really slow. We could slow it down a lot. It didn't have any bad habits like real major tip stalling or anything like that. It just, in fact, I flared a little too high. And there it is. So we ended up flying it about 3 times, and we progressively took some of the nose weight out, and then we settled on what was a good amount. And so we consider it very successful. It had lots of power. He was curious how much power the thing would have. And so one flight, I just took off and went straight up, and it just accelerated straight up. So it's got gobs and gobs of power. And the plane weighs, I think, 7 pounds or something like that. 7 pounds empty.
Do
so
the requirements stipulate what kind of power system they can have?
Oh, I asked them that, and I don't remember the answer. I don't think they did. I forgot the name of the motor. It wasn't a brand I was familiar with, but it was a very nice setup. But I think I asked them about power limiter on it, and they didn't have one. So I think, but it had an 80 amp speed controller, so it was at least limited by that. So it's like maybe a couple thousand watts.
The speed controller only limits you till it bursts into flames.
Yeah. So I was happy we had a nice successful flight, and they're going to go off and do some weight tests with it now. I didn't really lift any weight. I had to leave. I couldn't stick around. So they said they have their own pilot now. Now that they know that it flies and it's trimmed, they're going to go off and load it up and see how much weight it can carry from it. So we're real happy that they were able to fly. And then one of the guys in the team says he's looking into joining the club. He's really interested in learning how to fly model airplanes. So he's and he said he had like some sort of lifting body design he wanted to build or something like that. So
cool.
Looks like he has some cool stuff. So I was happy that they had a successful design. I was really surprised how well it flew, and I wish him the best of luck.
All right, so explain the timing now, because I thought they just had that competition. Is this for the next one?
They missed it. They didn't finish it in time.
Oh, I see.
So, but they wanted to know if it flew, and they didn't want to wait till next year or anything like that. And I think the rules changed for each year, so it wasn't any point in keeping the plane for next year. So it was, and we there was a lot of lessons learned. We told them, hey, you should do this, you shouldn't do that. They learned that he needs more access hatches for doing things. It was real hard to put weight in it.
Maintenance. Yeah,
exactly. Consider maintenance when you're building this thing. The tail was a little too big. It was a little too stable with the rudder. You know, I said, I'd hit full rudder. The thing would kind of barely, kind of. So yeah, even Mike was like, yeah, your rudder's a little too big. The vertical fin was, I think, oversized, and a few other things as far as how to disassemble it, and just those little things you don't know until you build something.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that's part of the reason they do this is to learn. So I think they learned a lot of lessons. They're real happy that it flew, and I'm happy that I didn't break it.
Right. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks to the team. Hopefully we'll see what they do next year.
Yeah. So they do that every year, that event?
Yeah, it's every year. I asked them, I think one of them is in Arizona, I think, or somewhere around in the Southwest is where they hold it. Right. I think they hold it in 2 places in the U.S. every year, but I can't remember the other place was. These are neat things, Bob. If they have one in Fort Worth every other year, sometimes usually every other year. They just had it already. This one's called the SAE design, and it's really neat. The students, they build model airplanes of various sizes, and they have tasks that they have to do. Some are as simple as lifting weight. Some are very advanced nowadays with computer-controlled, semi-autonomous, or even autonomous competition activities and things like that. So
what you're talking about is absolutely paralleled in my industry as well. I'm approached on a regular basis from schools and universities and students from all over the world, and they've got all of these trials that need to be executed by these different models. And I have to applaud their, I'm going to use the word audacity, because this is not a simple thing, airplanes or submarines, but to go in with no knowledge and just this like innate desire to learn is absolutely it feels so empowering to be able to interact with these kids and feed off of their excitement and their passion. So yeah, what you're talking about there is something I've been fortunate enough to experience in my little world as well.
Have you ever seen I think it was called the Mate?
Yep, Mate ROV.
Yeah.
We hosted that at the NBL while I was there.
Nice.
Yeah. At the NASA NBL. Yeah, I was a judge one year, and that was really neat too. That was fascinating. And like I said, the audacity of some of the kids, it was really impressive. Some of the stuff they did, that was really, really clever. And
well, part of it is audacity, I think, and part of it is they're not constrained by knowledge of what's impossible.
Exactly. Yeah. You're exactly right. I love that. That's exactly right. Nobody's done it. Well, it doesn't mean it can't be done.
Yeah, exactly. Elon Musk has entered the chat. So anyway, Bob, while I have your attention, as I mentioned before, we have Bob Martin joining us from the Nautilus Drydocks, and your specialty is RC submarines.
And it's a thing. It really is. And not very many people know that, despite my best efforts. But, you tell people that's what you do, and they kind of like, really?
Yeah, it's not your hobby. It's your livelihood.
For me, yes, it is. Yeah, I'm fortunate enough at this point in my life to have built, my business up while I had a real job. To the point where it was large enough to sustain me, and most importantly, I have a very, very understanding wife who is willing to float the idea of me quitting what was at the time a very lucrative position with a very large company to pursue this passion of mine.
Wow, yeah, that's a leap of faith. So let's step back a minute. So how long have you been in the hobby, and what really got you started into RC submarines?
So I laid down the keel of my first submarine in 1999. So it's been a minute since I've been working on these things.
Yeah, that's good run. Yeah.
And it was something that I was always passionate about ever since I was a kid. I remember doodling, little sketches when I was a kid in my sketchbook, probably with crayons, but, figuring out, not only what it would look like, but how it would work. What would go into it to make it do all of these things. I always had kind of an engineering mindset, even when I was a kid. But finally, I think that the actual impetus of it, and I will forever be grateful, there was a lady in the United Kingdom by the name of Vicky Ford. And this was in 1998 that she started her website, and she was building the boat that I had decided to build, and that was the Disney Nautilus from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, 1954. So she was building this thing from scratch, and most importantly, she was documenting it on her website step by step.
Wow.
And yeah, I know. I mean, back then, 1998, I know. Yeah. Lucky I had a computer. But so I'm like, you know what, this is my chance. I'm just gonna go ahead and do it. And I was always, a month or two behind her because she had a head start on me. But what actually ended up happening, she built the entire master pattern out of wood. And what ended up happening is people, convinced her that wood was not a very water-friendly material to be building a submarine out of. And she went into the molding and casting phase of construction to build a fiberglass hull. And she fused the master pattern to her molds, and the entire project died. And so here I was, I'm like, well, I was following you step by step. Like, what do I do now? And, I did some research, and fortunately, one of the most knowledgeable RC submarine participants in the world. Greg Sharp happened to live 30 minutes away from me in Victoria, British Columbia. So I managed to hook up with him, and he held my hand and guided me through the process of getting my first submarine built. And that was 2.5 years that I spent building that boat.
Wow. How big was it?
Sorry to interrupt. That answers a question I had a little earlier. When you said out or about, I'm like, wait a minute. He sounds Canadian.
I still got a little bit in there. My accent will actually change depending on who I'm talking with. But yeah, I was born and raised in Alberta, Canada, and then got some sense in me and moved to a much more beautiful place in Victoria, British Columbia. And then we moved down to Florida in 2008 during the recession. And the rest is history. We lived there for like 13 years and recently relocated to beautiful Woodlands, Texas, and never really looked back.
Yeah, it's my neck of the woods now.
Yeah, I know. It's fate.
Wow.
So to answer your question, I heard somebody say it earlier on. So that model was 1/32nd scale. So it was 66.5 inches long.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was sizable. It was big enough to cause you a little strain when you picked it up off the bench.
5 feet long, yeah.
Yeah.
Over 5 feet.
Did you have any previous experience with either RC cars or was
nothing?
So the gear was all completely new to you?
I knew less than nothing. I was always, I always went. My dad helped when I was young. I would go to work with him. He was a maintenance person for a school for boys, and so I learned woodworking, basic electrical and carpentry, and all of those. I was always good with my hands, but all of the radio aspect of it was absolutely a new world for me, a brand new world for me.
Yeah, I would imagine that the radio gear is a significant challenge with submarines because you have to penetrate the water and there's lots of...
Yeah, so yes and no. The modern RC airplane guys who are familiar with the 2.4 gigahertz, or if they're, after range, maybe the 900 megahertz, they may not be as familiar, but the old timers certainly will remember the megahertz band radios. And that is the bread and butter of the RC Submariner.
So that 72 megahertz will give you decent depth?
It will, although I am obligated to say legally that frequency is reserved only for airplanes, so don't use it.
Understood. Yeah.
75 megahertz is the FCC approved frequency band for surface and subsurface models in North America, or 40 megahertz in Europe.
All right. Don't you get 27 as well? 27 megahertz?
Yeah, but that equipment is not as popular or commonly utilized. Some people, with their ham licenses will use ham frequencies. But, in terms of off-the-shelf utilization, 72, 75 megahertz is where we need to be. There's a lot of, now, of course, you guys know, as will many of your listeners and viewers, RC radio manufacturers are not making that stuff anymore, and they haven't for quite a few years now. So the issue is that my world is so small that no manufacturer would be willing to make the investment to hold inventory of that old technology in order to support it. And so we're kind of forced to do a lot of hunting on eBay for, used radios or, new old stock radios and that kind of thing, which is okay for right now. What we are doing right now is a lot of research in the 900 megahertz band at higher outputs. So like 500 milliwatts and 1 watt output. And there's been some really, really good results so far in duplicating to a certain degree the previously attained control of sub-aquatic RC vehicles.
That reminds me, there is a airplane transmitter manufacturer. I think it's either Jetty or Gropner, and they do transmit on both 2.4 and 900 megahertz.
They do, yeah.
And I wonder if that could be adapted for your use as well.
It can. And actually, there is a very talented individual who happens to live up in Dallas, Ed Tortle. Again, talking about fate. He used to live up in the Northeast. And at the same time I moved, he moved to Dallas. And so we both moved down to the same area. But he was one of the very early adopters of the utilization of 2.4 gigahertz in submarines. And there's an argument for that because obviously when you dive a submarine, you can't see it, right? So it can become an issue, especially the longer you leave it under the water without being able to see it. And so his argument is, if you're operating in unknown bodies of water, black water, muddy water, weedy water, things that you're not going to know what's underneath the surface, it's not safe to dive terribly deep. And if that's the case, operations of the submarine at periscope depth, so with just the tip of an antenna sticking out, is perfectly feasible. And so you simply extend your antenna, you have it poking out of the water, and you've got that little bracket of area to work with. Now, to your point, he actually does have a Jetty radio, and we've been doing some research with some Free Sky, I believe it's pronounced Free Sky, radios. So the same sort of thing. So on the surface, you have a 2.4 gigahertz radio antenna, and then when you go below, it loses contact. It switches over to the lower frequency. So there's some really exciting stuff going on in our industry right now.
That's cool. It's funny because you can go on just about any RC swap site on Facebook or whatever. People can't give away 72 megahertz radios.
Yeah, I know.
Some of it's because they're old. They don't have multi-model memory or, dual rates or anything like that. But mostly it's because nobody flies with 72 megahertz anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So they're out there and people have been getting them. Now, what we want is all the bells and whistles. We want the programmability. We want the embedded fail safes. We want telemetry. We want everything that you guys have, and so that's really what the goal is can we leverage the current technology and apply it to our industry?
Yeah, I think the fanciest radio when 72 megahertz was popular would be a joke today.
A joke today.
Well, yeah, I think transmitters got much more capable outside of the frequency change from 72 to 2.4. They just they progressed with technology, and so if you want a really capable transmitter, you're kind of stuck in that 2.4 or something with modules, or like you guys talked about the dual band. So that makes sense.
Yep. And what's interesting about this, what I'm passionate about is introducing this hobby into the next generation of RC submariners. The people that have been doing it up to this point, do I want to call them boomers? They're of that generation where working with your hands and investing 200 and 300 and 400 hours in a project was normal. I guess you guys would be familiar with this as well. Back in the day, right? Everybody built their models out of, stringers and wooden frames, and they stretched, fabric and doped it. And,
it took hundreds the trees themselves.
Whittled it, with a knife. But, them days, they are over. In my experience, there are very few people right now willing to make the investment to build a project of that scope. We live, unfortunately, or fortunately, or whatever you want to call it, in an age of instantaneous gratification. Open the box, charge the battery, and you're up and running in 5.5 minutes. There's exceptions, obviously, but I think as a rule, that's kind of where we're at. Now, unfortunately, because our hobby is so small, there are few, if any, manufacturers out there who have a turnkey, out of the box, ready to run RC submarine solution that isn't a bathtub toy. There's lots of cheap eBay toys, that from China, but none of scale fidelity with scale performance and that kind of thing. So you're still looking at a tremendous investment of time and energy and resources to get it going, and that's the barrier to entry for our hobby.
I see. So for somebody who starts out today with zero knowledge, what do they need to learn to be able to get their own rig going?
So, there is a lot to learn. So I always recommend that people have some degree of RC experience, be it a RC car, an RC boat, something like that, to the point where they understand what is a transmitter, what's a receiver, how does the battery connect? How do I charge a battery? What does the servo do? And how does it move stuff around, when it moves the little arm? There's exceptions to that, like me. I didn't know what the heck I was doing when I started, but I would say I was probably the exception to the rule, and not the rule back then. Today's day and age is fortunate for anybody looking to get into it because the information is so much more accessible. Talking to the early innovators in this industry, they were literally building their transmitters out of electronic components and like vacuum tubes and whatever it was that was available back then. Yeah, exactly. And they were corresponding with each other with like paper and stamps. Like,
what?
Who does this? Like, to have a question and have to write a letter and wait weeks and weeks and weeks for somebody to get back to you. It's like, how do you function? But they did. And, it was slow progress, but it was progress, and it laid the foundation for where all of us are right now. So, where people are at, and that accessibility for information is absolutely awesome. YouTube alone, you could learn, 50 to 60% of what you needed to know just by watching YouTube videos.
Yeah.
I went ahead and in an effort to try and make things easier, I wrote a book on RC submarines called Diving Deep, and you can get that on my website on nautilusdrydocks.com. And it's just a high level overview about the hobby, basic terminology and how things kind of go together and all of that kind of stuff. So that's a great place to get started.
Yeah, I can vouch for that. I have a copy of the book autographed by Mr. Bob.
Nice.
There you go. One day it'll be worth so much money.
Oh yeah, eBay. But
sure it's already appreciated a nickel or two, I think.
But I do highly recommend it. I leafed through it and I thought it was great for both inexperienced and experienced people alike. So thanks for doing that. And you mentioned YouTube. You do have your own YouTube page.
I do. Yeah.
What it is?
It's under RC Sub Guy, and I apologize. I don't even know where I'm at. I think I'm at like 40 some odd thousand subscribers to my channel, but I've got over 500 videos.
Wow!
That I've put out over the years. So yeah, crank those videos out.
Yeah, I try to catch them. I'm a subscriber, and I try to catch them when I can. It's pretty neat to see all the neat projects you're working on. You always have something interesting going on in the shop. And I guess we should mention that you do have a shop that people can visit if they're in the Houston area.
I would love that. Yeah, absolutely. And I as a little caption to that, I would highly recommend either a phone call or a text in advance. We're a small business, and we're always out testing boats, picking up supplies, doing stuff. So I'd hate for you to kind of show up out of the blue and arrive with a locked door. Not that we don't go to work, but we're typically there, but I just don't want you to show up to a locked door. But yes, absolutely. Love having people out. I will always stop what I'm doing and give you the shop tour, let you know what we're up to.
So is the focus of the business like retail sales or like custom builds?
It's a little bit of both. I'd say right now my product mix is about 50-50. My real product scope is the drive modules or watertight cylinders that go into the boats. My mission statement, I guess you could call it, would be creating content that will help people understand and appreciate and hopefully be attracted to the hobby. And so I try and do that as much as I can. And that really the only way to do that is through builds, because people don't want to see me putting a cylinder together. It's boring. they want to see the cool stuff, like the Disney Nautilus and the sea views and remote controlled sharks and all of these cool things that we get to do.
Mm-hmm. Right. So you mentioned a little while ago, you were talking about the depth you would go to is really just periscope depth, things like that. So I don't mean this in a bad way. Just it hasn't clicked in my brain yet.
I know exactly what you're going to say, but go ahead.
Yeah. What's the appeal when it's underwater?
Okay. So the appeal of the hobby in general, I want to talk about that a little bit. Where I see the RC submarine industry fitting in the hierarchy of RC craft is really up near the top. And I don't want to sound, like I'm being elitist or anything like that, but there is a lot that go into these vehicles. It's not like, slapping some tires on a motor and 2 channels and you're off to the races. There's a lot that goes into it. It is one of the most inhospitable climates on the planet, and we are operating within it on a regular basis. So where I see this fitting in, this is for people who, and probably the best step up path to it are the RC boat craft, the scale RC boat people. They've done it for probably decades, right? And now they want something different. They want to take things to the next level. They want to challenge themselves. And to a certain degree, there is some elitism to it. It's not everybody that can do it. And you know that just by going to the pond. You will not see an RC submarine out there, 99% of the time. So that's really where I see it. And what I love about this is, most of the people who are really successful in our hobby, they're cross-pollinated. So they're into RC airplanes, they're into RC boats. Not so much the cars, but definitely planes and boats and submarines. And so it's just sort of this offshoot of it that really challenges your technical and engineering skills. So that's one half of the answer that I'm talking about. That's where the appeal comes. It's like, can I do it where so many others can't?
Sure.
The second part is in the operational constraints that it offers. Now, everybody's saying, oh, well, why don't you just throw a camera on it? Yeah, you can see under the water and drive it around, like an airplane underneath the water. Well, unfortunately, no. Most wireless video cameras are transmitting on high frequency, and high frequency does not penetrate water. So you unfortunately will not get wireless video signal to any great degree unless you have an antenna extending above the surface. So that does away with that aspect. What I typically do, I just put a high definition video camera on my submarine. I drive it around and I download it afterwards and watch all the cool footage after I get back home. But the operational challenge of driving an RC submarine is the second half of where the attraction lies. To dive your submarine using dead reckoning and your experience on heading, depth, and speed to figure out not only where it is, but where it's going to be and how it's going to resurface. That is the skill set that really sets RC submariners apart. I love it when people are like, where is it? I mean, that's why I do this, That's what a submarine is all about.
And you know the answer.
Yeah, only you. Yeah. And until you tell them, you're like, okay, look out there, right in front of that tree, draw a line, and up it comes. And
Nice.
Sure enough, there it is.
So related to that, are there any types of competitions that you guys do, whether formal or informal?
So most get-togethers are what we term fun runs. They're just a bunch of people getting together and having a good time talking about stuff, be it submarines or other things that they're interested in together. Just camaraderie, and you throw your boat in the water and just have a good time zipping it around and that kind of thing. There are events, and more commonly, historically, there were events that brought more of a professional air to the hobby. Back in the heyday of the RC submarine hobby, there could be thousands of people across the United States with operational submarines. But, back to what we talked about earlier, that demographic of people is literally dying off. They are literally dying. And, their boats are going into, eBay and estate sales and ending up on someone's mantle because they look really nice. Yeah. So the level of professional organization for events like that has sort of died off. It's something I'm trying to get back into right now. I hold an annual event right now it's being held in Cohutta, Georgia. It's going to be September 14th to 17th. It's a 4-day event. We get people from all over the United States who've come in. I launched it in 2000 and 2020, 2020.
Oh, okay.
and yet to have international attendees, only because, of course, this was right in COVID, and so everybody was kind of locked down. But to your point, we absolutely have competitions. We started out with very competitive competitions, if that makes any sense. First place, second place, third place. But the issue is when you're a newcomer to the hobby, you're not going to step up and go toe to toe with some guy that's been doing this for 20 years and has a boat that he's been working on for a decade and has it tuned, to within a half of a gram of proper buoyancy. So what we've switched it to is something that we call qualifications. And so we do still have competitions. We have the Great Submarine Race, which is kind of like a figure 8 demolition derby, which is super fun. But what we've got are these qualifications, and we came up with maneuvers that any submariner should be good at. So this could be submerged operations, surface operations, docking operations, and when you do that, you get qualified, and you have a badge, and you get like the military, you get little ribbons that go underneath it at these events. Yeah, exactly. And it's a mark of pride. People get pretty serious about making sure they hit all of the quals for that year, and it becomes much more collaborative. People are there to encourage you, not compete against you. So they'll be standing beside you. You're like, okay, well, throttle back. No, a little slower through the turn, or whatever they need to do for you to win that badge. So it's just a huge amount of fun. We have seminars and practical demonstrations and dinners, and it's just an amazing time.
Cool. So I have more questions, but I feel like I keep stepping on Fitz's toes. So Fitz, throw a question out
there. There was a couple of things that crossed my mind. One, when you talked about the challenge and the sense of accomplishment in building the RC subs, that's really what got me into it as well. Because I do tinker with RC subs, and I've always had an interest in them, but never too serious. And then, just a few years ago, I figured, I really, really want an RC sub. I've been buying airplanes and boats and even cars on and off. And I said, I really would be cool to have an RC submarine. But I was more attracted to the challenge of it. So that's why my first operational RC submarine was a conversion of a plastic model. Mm-hmm. I just I got on the workbench and said, I wonder what works, what doesn't work. I'll just throw something together and see how it does. And to my surprise, it did pretty good. It wasn't perfect, but it would dive. It was the feeling when you build something and it dives underwater is actually pretty pretty novel when you do it.
Well, you've got the advantage of being an exceptionally talented individual with a lot of experience. So don't sell yourself short. You did an amazing job, and I've seen one of your boats working in person. I think it was that little Typhoon that you brought.
Oh yeah.
Out that one time. Yeah, that was really, really cool.
That Typhoon had a long history. I actually bought it while I was in college. I saw it on the shelf. I said, "Hey, I wonder if that would make a nice little RC boat or something." And I played with it for maybe a day or two, and stuck it away. And it sat literally for 15 years or something like that. In the box. And that was when I saw that. I was like, I need to finish this up. And by the time I pulled it out, I had more knowledge and more experience. And so I had to undo a few things I had done with it. And the internet was lots of resources on the internet and stuff. And I had some old model airplane parts from micro flyers, and I just kludged it together and built it. And it wasn't working when you tried to pop, but it actually has it's a static diver. It has a working ballast system in it.
You talked me through that. I was super impressed with that.
Yeah, the gear's locked up or something because I didn't use it. But yeah, and it actually mostly worked. I had some lessons learned about not using large rubber, what do you call it, seals on some of the controls. And so when it pumped the water in, the seals would expand. Like, okay, don't do that. So that's why the ballast only half worked. But it was still, I could still kind of, you can see it change in ballast in the water as I moved the pump in and out.
Yeah,
and syringing it out. So I had a lot of fun with that, and you haven't seen it. I had one of those submarines that were a self-diving toy.
Yeah. It would dive and then resurface, and then dive and resurface.
Yeah.
One of them. Yeah.
I kludged it together. I added a working rudder, and I took out the self-diving system and I just put a servo on the dive planes, and that thing. I think Terry, you've seen that one. A long time ago, and I think it was like my first one, and it worked pretty good, except that the motor was designed for like 2 D batteries or C batteries, and I had like a 2-cell lithium, and the thing would literally get on plane full throttle.
That was one of my very first videos that I put out, was a Type 7 on plane.
So yeah, I totally agree when you said about the tinkering and the experimental aspect of it. I totally agree. It was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with it, and I still do it. I've got a couple things I'm still working on. I get that flying sub working again, and some other things, and some larger stuff. I've got some more. I still like to do. I'm weird. I like to do the plastic models. I've actually got I guess I never told you about. I have a Sea View from. Who was it?
The Mobius, 39-inch Sea View. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I got a Mobius Sea View, and I've got that horrible, inaccurate Japanese. I-53. There was a guy I downloaded a bunch of pictures. He converted it to a real I-25 or something. The one with the seaplane launcher. He had to basically remold the nose, but he did a really neat job, and it inspired me. So one of these days I'll get around to it. One of these years. Whatever.
Yeah. So what you're talking about, and I just want to touch on this really quickly. It's not a cheap hobby to get into, obviously, but there are less expensive ways of doing it. For example, Revell of Germany makes some really, really beautiful models that are very conducive to converting to RC. And that's things like the Type 7 and 1/72nd scale, the Gato. Oh yeah, there you go. So if you're a U.S. submarine fleet boat guy, the Gato Baleo kit that they have in 72nd is
that's a big model.
55 inches long.
Yeah, I seen it built. I was surprised how big for being a plastic model. It was huge.
Yeah, and then you've got the skipjack kit in 72nd scale. You've got the Bronco Type 23 in 1/35th scale. So, and all of these kits can be got for like $120, or something like that, and they're completely conducive to conversion to beautiful RC submarines. Now, are they going to be super durable? Well, probably not. They're styrene plastic, and there's lots of little greebly bits sticking out of them. But if you're looking at a less expensive way of getting into it, that's one way of potentially going about it. The other one, and I'm sure you guys have seen this in your industry, is 3D printing. It's huge right now for us in our industry. a lot of really talented people. And it's something I've glommed onto as well, creating 3D files so that people can 3D print their own RC submarine, hulls. Now, you can't just like hit print and print your own, electronics module with all the stuff in it, but at least the hull portion of it is much more accessible now that this 3D printing technology is becoming so mainstream. It's really, to the eternal grumpiness of the previous generation, lamenting the death of the traditional craftsman. It's really a game changer. It's opened it up to almost anybody.
Yeah, I think in a way that may draw more of the younger crowd in, the 3D printing thing. I think that could get their interest and say, hey, I can now print my own boat in any size I want.
Yeah.
And then they just, confer with you to get the all electronic goodies for it. But at least it's a start. It
is. And the beauty of it, which is crazy to me, I offered these little, if you're familiar with the German Seehund, it was a midget submarine. It was like a 2-person crew, German submarine, very, very small. And the model was like yay big, say maybe 28 inches in overall length. But I've had people scale it up to like 6 feet in length and print it out. I think the biggest one that I've heard of so far, a super talented guy by the name of Steve Hodges in the Carolinas there, 3D printed, was like a 9-foot long RC submarine. We're talking something, I think it was 2,200 hours of print time.
Wow. I don't know if you know, here in the Clear Lake area, there's a company called Re3D, and they specialize in large format 3D printers.
Oh, okay.
Types. Yeah, I mean, big, like you could print like a person, They sometimes have open houses and stuff you can visit. Some pretty impressive work. So yeah, I can totally see people really printing some large stuff just because.
Yeah.
And that's kind of on my to-do list at some point too. Is the 3D print something. I think I got some files already. Just something unusual or something big or whatever. Just because I printed it was a hydrofoil boat I found on Thingiverse. I printed it, drove it around a little bit. I've taken it out to my boat floats every once in a while. But that was it. Just a simple FDM. But it worked. And it was pretty neat. So there's a whole world out there for you. And
it is. Would I be able to share out my screen? I've got a couple of pictures here.
Go right ahead.
Click present.
Yeah. And I had another kind of question that you touched on, something else. I don't know if you want now or later. Maybe you can touch on it later. Is that we've talked about these conversions and things. Is that something you offer? Some sort of, say, conversion kit or a beginner's thing? Somebody says, hey, either I want to start with RC Submarine or I have this plastic model. Do you have some guts I can stick in there? Anything like that?
Yeah. So that obviously the most important, and expensive part is the watertight cylinder that drives everything. And really the product offering that I have can be customized to almost any subject. Now, I do not do the really, really tiny boats. So unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to make a cylinder for that Type 7 that you have on the back shelf there, because that requires like a little 2-inch diameter watertight cylinder. I would be remiss if I did not mention an individual by the name of David Merriman III, who really brought the world of RC submarines into the commercially reachable scope of people. He commercially manufactured conversion kits and watertight cylinders, whereas before it was very much people in their garages, building for themselves and friends. And he is, kind of known as not the original godfather, but like the second godfather of RC submarines right now. Godfather? Certainly one of the most experienced individuals in that arena. Professional model builder. He worked on, like Hunt for Red October and like all of these movies, special effects miniatures that were used in those movies. But what he did is exactly what you're talking about, actual like conversion kits. Now, is there something that I manufacture where it's like a turnkey, like here's everything that you need down to the nut and bolt to convert this, kit into a functional model? I don't. David did at one time. The issue was the expense of producing those kits exceeded by a considerable margin the cost of the actual kit itself. So it was more expensive for all the little greebly bits and pieces to convert it than it was for the actual model kit. Not inclusive of the watertight cylinder, just the rudders and dive planes and brackets and bulkheads and linkages and all of those things. Super labor intensive. Not because each individual part was expensive to manufacture, but because there was like 100 of them in order to do it properly. So the short answer is I've got things that will help. The long answer is I don't have everything that would make it easy. But hopefully, with people like me and other experts, in your corner, you can do it. It's absolutely doable, even with the stock pieces in those plastic kits.
So it's not turnkey. There's still a minimal level of DIY involved, but
correct. Yeah. I think the only turnkey kit that I can recall that was a bona fide RC submarine was put out by a kit or by a manufacturer called Thunder Tiger. And they came out with a kit called the Neptune back in the day, and it had a peristaltic pump-based ballast system. The watertight compartment was made out of 1/4 inch thick acrylic. I swear to God, this thing, you could probably dive it like 400 feet deep and it would be completely fine. But it was way over-engineered. It was really well put together, a beautiful performer. And they were selling it, I think at the time, it was like $600, which is unheard of in the RC submarine world. And unfortunately, they kept packing more and more features into it until now I think the same equivalent kit that they're putting out is I think they call it the Seawolf, is like $3,000.
Oh wow.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little harder to chew on, but still there. But the other manufacturers out there, some of them do an exceptionally good job, such as Engel of Germany or Maximus Madelbau out of Germany, for giving you very comprehensive kits with excellent instructions that you could follow and build a submarine from start to finish. But those manufacturers are few and far between. Yeah.
But, sorry, we were interrupting you. You're going to show us some stuff?
Yeah, well, I can try it. We'll see if this works. Let me know if and when you can see that screen.
Oh, got it. There we go. Yes.
There we go. So this is the Revell of Germany 1/72 Gato plastic model kit. 55 inches in overall length. It's an absolutely beautiful size for RC, exceptionally well detailed. But again, a plastic model kit that really lends itself well to RC conversion. Here's another one. Yay! That's the flying sub for people of a little longer in the tooth maybe than others. The Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea from the 1960s. That's the flying sub that was birthed in the Sea View from that television and movie series. But I created a conversion kit for that plastic model kit that works really, really well. I wanted to show you some of these like older, these are like piston tanks that Engel of Germany put out like back in the 80s, the 1980s.
Wow.
We were these are the guts we were talking about. Like, look at that thing. Like, wow.
Well, thanks for zooming in. Wow. Wow, that's stone eyes and bear skins, huh?
Yeah. But that's kind of the things that was back in the day. Talking about 3D printing and the Sea View. This is like a 7-foot long model of the Sea View from Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. And
is that the docking bay too? Speaking of flying,
it is. Yeah, that's the bay underneath. I offer these files on my website actually. This is a little kit that I put out. This I'm really proud of. This is a German Type 212 in 72nd scale. It's a nice size. You can tuck it under your arm. You can bring it to the pond. Fitz, you've seen this at the get together.
I was going to say, yeah, the black one.
That's exactly it. So you can buy it either in full kit form, which is just all the bits and pieces, and then I've made a full video instruction series where you follow through step by step to build it, or you can buy it with the electronics module assembled and you just do the rest of it, or you can buy it fully assembled, ready to go, out of the box, charge it up, and away you go.
Yeah, it looked like a lot of fun to drive around. It was very sprightly when I saw it.
It is very fun. Yeah, very fun. I just want to pick out just a couple of other interesting things that we're working. This is something we're working on right now.
Wow. So articulated, is that a shark, right?
That is a great white shark. Yeah, and this was based off of a little toy that I found on Amazon. And so the pectoral fins will have thrusters, and as you move the thrust left and right, the shark swims through the water in a very frightening, realistic manner. So we're excited to get this thing.
I'm going to say you can have a lot of fun with that at the beach.
Yes, absolutely. And you can go as crazy as you want. Like, for example, this little guy here, this is a little blueback in 196 scale. It's like 22 inches long or something like that. For people with the penchant, there's this guy. And again, Fitz, you've seen this one. This is 10 feet long.
That's
US Boleo.
Yeah, that one, talk about some of the features that one has. That one, that really maxed out your radio, didn't it?
It did, yeah. And probably just because I was as naive in terms of radio capabilities compared to you guys, but this had, I believe it was 14 individual functions. So the bow planes would retract, periscopes, spinning radar, lights, sound. The guns would swivel. It had functional sound. It had functional exhaust. Lots and lots and lots of stuff going on with this thing.
Yeah, it was so big you needed like a ladder on wheels. What was it? Some sort of carriage?
Yeah. It was a 10-foot extension ladder that we converted into a carry crate. Yeah, exactly. It's just fun stuff. Like we did this as a promotional thing for breast cancer awareness. It was a permit class submarine that we painted pink. And we auctioned off, and it went really, really well.
Oh, nice.
So, how did I do that? That was fancy.
I don't know. That's pretty cool. 2 screens at once.
Yeah. But the venue, so you can see the water is super clear here.
And where is that?
This was up in Dallas they're at a quarry.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And which is weird for Texas. I don't know if everybody's from Texas or not, but usually we are operating in mud on a good day. Yeah. Whoa, what the heck am I doing here?
I don't know.
Can we?
There
we go.
There you go.
There. Check. Yeah, and you can get as big as you want. So this is like the granddaddy version of that little 212 that I was talking about earlier on.
Very bulbous looking.
Yeah. But fun stuff.
I know what that is.
Steampunk submarine.
Oh,
this was based off of. Go ahead. You probably know what it is.
Yes, this is from a different color, but from Stingray Marionette Show.
Yep.
Jerry Anderson's.
Jerry Anderson.
Yeah.
So I based it off of that kit, and I converted it into kind of a steampunky, fishy looking deal.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Is that the missile coming out of the mouth?
This was the access hatch. And so the diver would come out, and there was an actual functional operating iris portal inside that he could step through and walk down out.
So for those of you listening, make sure that you check out the video so you can see this thing. It's pretty.
Yeah, all of this stuff is on my channel somewhere. I wouldn't be able to tell you where exactly, but I've just been super fortunate to have had the opportunity to build boats for amazing people. You know, I've built for you know, famous actors and actresses and music composers. I've had a chance to work with the Department of Defense, with the, you know, National Science Foundation. One of the funnest things that I ever did, I worked with NASA, and I created a functional prototype of the Titan turtle, an ROV that they were going to send to Titan to swim in the methane oceans there. So I'm just blessed to have been able to have done all of these really, really cool things over the course of my, you know, I guess you could call it a career, but my life in this little world of RC submarines.
Oh, that's pretty cool. All right, can I get to my other questions now, Fitz?
I think. Well, I have one other question, real quick.
Go ahead. Yeah.
What is your most popular sub or type of sub, or what seems to be the hot thing?
Yeah, so that is so personal, and this is one of the questions that I ask people when they're just getting started. They're like, "Well, what boat should I get?" And then my answer to that is always, "What is the boat that you are most passionate about?" Don't buy something just because it's cheap. You know, don't buy something just because it performs well. Buy it because you look at it and you're like, "That is a cool boat." And when that happens, you know, when your momentum gets stalled in the build, it'll be much easier to come back to it when you're looking at it on that shelf saying, "God, that thing is so cool, I have to get that built." Then you know, maybe there's something else out there for me. And obviously you're limited by what's out there, you know, to build, but you know, that is always the best place to start. If you're passionate about a boat, exhaust that path first and pursue the other ones afterwards.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, for me, it's World War II. I think the World War II boats are the most interesting because they got so much going on with them.
They do, yeah.
All the guns.
I agree with you.
Yeah. All right, sorry, Terry.
That's a matter of personal preference. You know, you'll get a lot of people who are only want the modern ones, and obviously doing what I do, I work a lot with, you know, Navy veterans, you know, people who served on these boats, and you know, when they spent, you know, 8 years on a Los Angeles class submarine, it's kind of hard to sell them on a Gato. You know what I mean?
Yeah. All right. So this next question I'm going to ask comes out of my own ignorance. So in the airplane world, people are often confused why people like Fitz and I have 50 different airplanes. And when we explain, well, they're all a little bit different, they don't understand those subtle qualities that we can appreciate. So I feel like I have the same lack of understanding of submarines. You talk about one performing better than another. What are the characteristics that say this submarine performs better or differently than another?
And that is so much a matter of personal preference. So obviously, if you take a look at things from a physics perspective, the aforementioned World War II boats, you know, they were primarily designed as surface craft that could dive, right? Okay. It was like, oh, there's the bad guys. I'm gonna dive and shoot some torpedoes and try and sneak away before they get me. Versus the modern equivalent that spends, you know, 98% of the time submerged. And so typically what you'll see is, in my opinion, you know, those older boats, they just look so much cooler. You know, there's so much to look at, and the profile on the water is beautiful. The other thing that they've got going for them, typically the control surfaces are mounted behind the propellers, which gives you actually increased maneuverability over modern counterparts. They stopped doing that because it's noisy to do that. Right. You know, all of that turbulent water flowing over the control surfaces made them louder and easier to detect. And so they moved them in front. But now when that happens, you have to be moving along at a really fast pace in order for them to be effective. And so you'll find a decrease in maneuverability and response in the modern boats, but they'll be fast and sleek. So it's always a, you know, trade-off. Everything is about compromise, right? There's no perfect answer out there. It all just kind of goes back to what do you value more in your model? You know, is it looks better, has more stuff to it, performs better, it's faster, you know, wherever that checkbox lies, that's the path that you would need to end up going down. And there's ways to cheat. There's ways to cheat too. You know, you can always, you know, tweak things outside of scale to compensate for some of the lackings of a particular design. But
okay, yeah, you were reading my mind. That was going to be my next question, because very often with scale model airplanes, you might increase the size of the stabilizers to make it fly better at a smaller size. So apparently there's similar tricks you can do with submarines.
Typically, you're going to see a lot of clear plastic glued onto rudders. That's typically what ends up happening. You get these, like the old Russian boats, like the Alphas and the Kulas, they are like missiles. They go so fast, but their rudders are like this big, and so they don't turn worth a darn. And so you'll have these big sheets of plastic glued to the lower rudders in a lot of cases to help get those things turning the way that they should.
That's exactly the problem with my Typhoon. It has terrible turning unless I dive it, and then the top part of the rudder is underwater, and it actually will turn.
Yeah, exactly. And the beauty of it is there's such a long history. It's almost as long as aviation, obviously. Actually, maybe longer of RC submarines, or submarines in general. Sorry. And so you've got this massive spectrum of different designs and characteristics and materials, and each one is just its own story. So depending on what you want, you'll find it. There's something out there that will absolutely appeal to you.
All right, that's cool. Now, something that you hinted on earlier is the size of the sub community. So in the airplane world, we are always commenting on how intimate that world is. It's rare that one of us goes to an event and doesn't either know somebody there that we didn't know was going to be there, or we talk to somebody and we find out that we have a common friend. There's the threads are woven very tightly there. So I would imagine it's even smaller for subs. And you were talking about somebody who's in the special effects community. So we had a guest not long ago, Steve Neal. We had him on because he does airplanes, but then we got into some sub talk as well.
Yeah, I know Steve really well. You bet. Yeah. So I'm going to take a guess here right now. I would say right now, and this is just an educated guess on my part, worldwide, globally, the number of people who own a functional RC submarine is probably right at about 1,000.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
It's an elite club.
There's lots of people in situ, who have completed projects, who know about the industry, who attend events. But in terms of people who have a fully functional, capable RC submarine in their possession, I would say, maybe I'm off by a factor of 5, right? Maybe it's 5,000 people. It is not a large amount. And, in the online community, it tends to be the same people, frequenting the same places at all times. And certainly within the North American community, there are certain characters that are exceptionally well known. So to your point, yes, it is a very intimate community. I would say it used to be a lot more, maybe I could use the word elitist. Information was maybe held a little bit closer, because you want to be the only guy, right? But I think the general consensus now, or the trend, is information sharing, and I think people are far more open to doing that right now. And some people are better at it than others, but as a rule, just a super supportive and open and warm community to be part of.
Oh, awesome. So I've mentioned on the show before, I have an interest in getting involved with subs. The scale aspect of it, while I can appreciate, it doesn't really excite me to participate in that. What I'm looking for is like a sport thing, and like you were mentioning before, with a camera, not necessarily a live feed, but something that I've got a lake behind my house with clear water. I just want to go down there and see what's at the bottom of the lake and find some golf balls to pull.
Yeah.
Is there something like that is available for me, or a path that's not overly burdensome?
Yes, and so I'd say there's a couple. So there are some exceptionally awesome, call them ROVs. Obviously, you know what those are.
Sure.
Tethered boats, and those will give you live feed, and they've got RC grappling arms and spotlights and auto hover mode and like all sorts of like amazing things. I've owned a couple over the course of my career, and they're a lot of fun to play with. People in our world, our scale world, they kind of, there's a little bit of a scoff to it because it's like open up the box and charge up the batteries and throw it in the water, kind of thing. But they'll also be the first ones who are like, hey, can you send your ROV down to get my boat? So there's a few of those floating around for sure. So in terms of fun, and if you're into that explorational thing, that I would absolutely go that way. And I've got, videos of homemade ROVs, using bilge pumps for thrusters and just running a cable up with a security camera mounted in the bow. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer kind of person, you could probably build one for like $100 or something like that. Just PVC pipe and some bilge pumps. So that is certainly something that would be doable. For those, there's a lot of people who scoff a little bit at the RC boating community that aren't into the fast electrics or hydrofoils and that kind of thing. It's like it's too boring, it's too slow. So there's some RC subs like my little 212, for example. It will leap out of the water. So if you want something that will keep you on your toes in terms of controlling it in an underwater environment, there's options for that out there as well. If you want that adrenaline filled operational experience, that exists as well. But most of the boats out there are scale representations of full-sized craft, and you will not see typically a U-boat breaching out of the water.
Right. Yeah. I suspect what would happen is if I turn the key on this one day and get the sports ship I'm thinking of, that's going to turn me on to the scale side of it. And
I think so. Yeah. You'll get exposed to more people, more boats. And honestly, you start to appreciate, the other aspects of the hobby. When you're walking around all the tables and you're like, God, that is so cool.
Yeah. I had similar experiences with RC sailboats. For so long, you could look at them, man, that's pretty cool, but doesn't sound like fun. And then I drove one day and wow, it was really cool. And so now I've got a couple that I do here. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with the RC rock crawlers. Like they go so slow. What's the appeal? But wow, it's really fun to do that stuff. So,
and it's technical, right? Operating them is absolutely, mentally engaging.
Right. Yeah. I thought you just pull the trigger and it goes over whatever rocks, but no, there's really technique and strategy to make it do the right thing. Mm-hmm. So, and I had no appreciation for that until I tried it and sucked at it. And then and realized, kind of going back to your initial point with submarines, it's fun because it's challenging.
Yeah.
And so, it's also an appeal for me in almost all the airplane stuff I do. And if I think about it, most of the RC toys that I have challenge me in some way.
Yeah. So there was the comment made earlier. I believe it was Fitz. He was asking, like, what's the first boat that I recommend? Get a boat that you feel comfortable picking up and dropping on the floor.
Yeah.
I'm being serious here because your first boat is going to have the heck kicked out of it, just because you're not familiar with the operations. I had a good friend, a good customer out of California, whom I built a little German 212 for. Got it all primed and beautiful, brought it to Subfest where he operated it for the first time. And by the time that boat left, all of the paint had been stripped from the bottom and all of the periscopes had been sheared off of the top. But he had a blast. So, anything that you can put in the water that is, bulletproof, that you can just have fun and run into things without feeling terrible about, is probably the best first boat that you can get. A lot of people make the mistake of being like, oh, I want the $5,000 7-foot long scale perfect museum replica of a German Type 7C, with operational this, that, and the other thing. And, either they lose interest in it or they get it and they're too scared to operate it.
Yeah.
I can't tell you the number of projects I've picked up from people who built them to an exacting standards, but who would not ever run them because they were too scared of losing it.
Right.
We've seen that in the model airplane world too on occasion.
Yeah, both parts. People who build airplanes are afraid to fly, and also, and this is super common, people who start out, they want a P-51 or an F-16 as their first airplane, when really they're much better off with something expendable that's going to be gentle for them.
Yeah, a foam Cessna or something.
Yeah. That's interesting that it happens in the sub world too.
Absolutely it does. It does.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked by all the parallels we're finding here, because you talked about the traditional builders having some sort of angst against the people who take the shortcuts. Same thing with builders of RC planes, and then when ARFs came in or when foamies came in, they weren't real modelers. But I hope most people by this point appreciate that those easier options introduce new people into the pool, because when the only option was you had to be a master builder to get into it, you had to be a jack of all trades. You had to be a master builder and also somebody who could fly a plane or operate a sub. But now you don't have to be a master builder. You can be a great pilot. And maybe there were people who were super great pilots, but not great builders. So the overlap is much greater, and we're all the better for it.
It's what we term, what our hobby lacks is the gateway drug. We need those ARFs, or ARTRs or whatever the terminology is, to hook this new generation of people, because after they play with those for a year or 2 years, their confidence level rises, their ability level increases, and the opportunities for them to expand their skill set to the point where they can start building things on their own now becomes a possibility. And that's not going to be true for everybody. There's going to be people who's like, they're just going to keep buying foamies. They'll just go through them like Tic Tacs, but
right.
Whatever. there's room for those people as well.
Yeah. So a common theme with RC airplanes is it's not a question of if it's going to crash, but only when. So is there something like that with submarines? Like how often does one end up in the bottom?
So it's always the thing. It's like it's if not when, or wait, when, not if.
Yeah.
It will happen to you eventually. If you've run a submarine long enough, you will end up with it at the bottom of whatever body of water it is you've been operating in. I was fortunate in that, in doing it for so many years, I could count probably on one hand the number of times that I've lost a boat to the point I had to get wet to go get it, which is not common, by the way. And I'm not saying that it's because I'm any good, but it's maybe just I was operating in better water or whatever. But there's a lot of things that can be done to help mitigate that risk. Fail-safe systems that will, for example, automatically bow ballast, or marker buoys or sonar buoys, and like all sorts of things that can be done to help recover craft in the case that when they go down. I would say it's pretty rare to lose a boat permanently. Usually it's misplaced, not lost. It's like I misplaced my submarine for a few days while the divers found it. But it's not like an airplane where it's like, whoops, my finger slipped and now I'm trucking a wheelbarrow full of splinters back home to my house. It flooded or whatever. Typically, it can be salvaged. You'll get it back home, you'll dry it out. Maybe you need to replace, a component here or there, but it will live to dive another day. Exceptions, obviously, people operating in a 200-foot deep rock quarry, they're asking for it when they
drive around Lake Tahoe, which is 1,000 feet deep.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it will happen. Something will happen. Either it'll end up stranded in the middle of the pond, and someone will have to go out and get it, with their tugboat, or another submarine trying to push it ashore. Or typically, you'll dive and it won't come back up, and then it's a little bit of a search party to recover it. But it's all part and parcel of the experience. I would rather do that than take the aforementioned wheelbarrow full of parts home.
Sure.
In the car.
Good point. All right. I've got just one question left, but Fitz, am I standing in your way of asking anything?
No, go ahead. You're good.
Okay. So Fitz talks about boats and submarines fairly often. And every time the topic of submarines comes up, Lee and I challenge him to get something that shoots torpedoes. And he hasn't come through for us yet. So what can you do to get him down that road? So,
in terms of operational features that have been successfully implemented in an RC submarine, operational torpedoes have been done to death in many, many scales. Electric versions, gas versions, even rocket-propelled versions. We've had operate like live functional depth charges. Fully functional rocket-powered missiles, pneumatic missiles, water-powered missiles. We've had GPS, controlled boats. We've had autonomously controlled boats, operational periscopes. Like all of these things have been successfully implemented in the past. The only limit to what you can do is your own experience and capabilities and how deep your pockets are. That is literally the only thing limiting what you can do with these boats. And torpedoes, honestly, are probably one of the least technically challenging things that could potentially be implemented. The reason that you don't see them more is that because one of the most successful technologies for launching and propelling them is compressed gas. And now when you start talking about compressed gas torpedoes, basically you're talking about a small pressure vessel. And the odds of accidental explosion potentially goes up, mistimed launches and that kind of thing. So from a manufacturer's perspective, and I fall into this bucket, the liability is very, very high. And so, putting out a commercial kit for torpedoes is problematic. I am working on a system right now, and I'm willing to take the risk, provided people will sign the paperwork before they purchase. But there are lots of really great examples out there of successfully implemented weapons of mass destruction.
Gotcha. So what you're saying is it's easy. And Fitz is lazy. He should have done it by
now. All right. So you saw me get up for a second. I do.
Yeah, like you're being attacked by bees.
No. I have this is a 3D printed torpedo that actually Jeff's father was tinkering with because he has a PT boat.
Oh,
and
right.
He was talking about torpedoes, and he said, "Hey, you got a submarine? I can print out some at a smaller scale." So he gave me a few samples of different sizes. I wasn't sure which size. So he said, "Here, try this and this and this one." So it is something in the back of my mind I've been working on. I've actually been thinking about powering, how I would run them. I was actually thinking of an electric motor on them.
Put a single cell lipo in there.
Well, not even a lipo. I think we could probably use a capacitor.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And a single motor.
Search for Dan Catcher, DK Models. He will show you exactly how to wire those up in his excellent video showcasing them successfully being implemented in his German Type 7.
All right. Oh, same thing I have.
Yeah. A little capacitor gets charged up, a little pager motor, and it goes for about 3 or 4 seconds. And
that's all you go.
That's it.
Fantastic. So I'll do it. I'll work on it. Because I seen somebody who was able to shove a launcher into that Type 7, so I might do that. Especially now.
Actually, that in the same scale, that Gatto class submarine, David Merriman implemented not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but 6 fully operational torpedo tubes.
Wow.
in that boat that fired on the most intricate, like clockwork mechanism from a single servo.
A single servo did all that.
Yeah,
that's impressive.
Yep.
All right. Wow. So if this has already been done, then Fitz, your challenge is ICBMs.
ICBMs. Yes. Who am I attacking?
It doesn't matter. Who you got?
No.
How about a homing torpedo?
There you go.
All right. So I've done RC torpedos.
Oh yeah.
I built that season submarine that would actually, so it would, the torpedoes were fairly large. They're about that big, but it would launch each one of those individually. And I'm working on a big one right now. So you'll have the main submarine controls and then a separate controller that will allow you to launch and steer each of the two torpedoes individually.
Oh, neat. Fantastic.
So, Fitz, what type of submarine did you say the one is in Chicago? A Type 9?
Yeah, it was a Type 9.
Okay. Yeah, on our recent, maybe not the last one, but the one before, I talked about my visit to the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, where they have the captured U-boat. So, yeah, super interesting to see that up close.
Yes.
All right, Fitz, I'm out of questions.
Yeah, I think I'm out of questions too. Speaking of submarines, I was thinking back really the first time I saw an RC submarine, and being a Connecticut Yankee, it was at the Groton Submarine Base. They used to hold an event there. I don't know if they still do it or not, but they used to.
They do. It was just took place May 20th.
Was it? They still do that.
They still do it.
Yeah, it was. I had heard about it, and at the time I lived up there, so I popped down to the base because I've been there, and it was a cool thing to see. This was in the '90s, early '90s, I think, and it was just neat to see RC submarines of all types. And it was just a fascinating event.
So them days they are done. Obviously, with I think it was after 9/11, base access was completely cut off, and so you had to actually pre-register in order to get access.
Oh, okay.
In the last couple of years, because I am not a full citizen, I was rejected from attending. Unfortunately, so
sorry to hear that.
Hopefully next year it'll be back to normal again. But this last year, they held the same event at that Groton pond, and as part of the deal, all of the attendees got to take a guided tour of a Virginia class nuclear submarine.
Oh, nice!
Neat.
Wow.
Yeah,
and I've never been to the place. There's a submarine museum right next door.
It's amazing. If you have the chance to go, it is absolutely amazing.
And you can go through the first nuclear submarine, the Nautilus, is there for you to walk around, and a bunch of other stuff. Also, there's a big submarine event somewhere in the upper Midwest, right? Chicago?
Coming up in August, Carmel, Indiana. Is the next one. Yeah,
that looks like a really nice pond. Have you been to that one?
Carmel Reflecting Pond. It is absolutely gorgeous. It's like 3 feet deep, crystal clear water, big fountain in the middle. Yeah. It's a great time.
Yeah, it looks like they get a pretty good crowd there too, from some of the pictures I've seen.
They do. It's a nice central location. Yeah. The Indianapolis Admirals do that in conjunction with the subcommittee.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, we're back to another small world topic. So we're familiar with the Indy Admirals, and Fitz, Scott Black, who we've had on the show, he's part of the Indy Admirals. He also does the sailplane stuff, and he's at the Nats with Lee next month. So, wow, everybody knows everybody. We're just one big happy family.
6 degrees of separation. Yeah.
So, Bob, you just touched on, I guess we should mention, there is a I don't know if it's international, but at least a North American organization called the Subcommittee.
Yes, I was remiss in not mentioning it, which is kind of funny because I'm the president of the subcommittee.
Oh, really?
Just so happens.
Your election of duty here, right?
So it's a group of individuals who have a passion about submarines, and it could be anything about submarines, memorabilia, computer games, but typically what it trended towards was the RC aspect of submarines. So that is absolutely out there. I recommend it for anybody as a resource if you're interested in submarines at all. They have a publication that comes out called the Subcommittee Report. It comes out every 4 months. It is absolutely a world-class publication, talking with articles about submarine history, again, memorabilia, build articles, historical stories. It's the most amazing thing. Jeff Porteous is an individual who spearheads that publication, and it is, as I mentioned, world class in its content.
Yeah, it is pretty neat. I have a bunch of issues. In fact, that Typhoon Sub was an article I submitted some years ago.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
I have an article published in the magazine.
Published author. Look at that.
So yeah, I totally agree. The magazine's totally awesome. It's really cool to see.
It is. A membership is $10 a year.
Is it only 10? Okay, I let mine lapse. I need to rejoin then. That's super cheap.
Absolutely be worth it.
I will do that.
3 issues of the subcommittee report. Even if you don't go to the forums, even if you don't use the website or do anything else, just to get those 4 copies digitally into your mailbox is worth everything.
Yeah, they're nice. They had nice historical articles too and stuff like that. And just as for a casual, I'm not a super diehard submariner person, but I just have a casual interest. I like machines and technology and that kind of stuff. So
it's digestible. It's not like a novel that you need to read. It's just like, you skim through it. It's like, you leave it on the toilet, and you read it when you're in there.
All right. So I just thought of this. What is your favorite submarine movie?
So 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Yeah.
Really?
The 1954. It has a soft spot because it was my first boat, and but I love the story, the themes that it raised. Of course, there's always these other ones too. Hunt for Red October. It has to be one of my favorite movies of all time as well. Which is my second favorite submarine behind the Nautilus from 20,000 Leagues. It's the Typhoon class Russian submarine.
Oh wow! Do you have an opinion on what the most accurate submarine movie is?
Honestly, and I hate to admit this, I don't know that I would be the right person to ask that question too. I am a submarine fan, but I am not. I did not live in that world. I was not an active or serving submariner. So there's a lot of individuals who would have infinitely more knowledge about the accuracy of those movies than I might be able to offer, unfortunately.
So anybody listening to this show, if you have an idea what you might think is the most accurate submarine movie,
yeah, that would be that's a good top. I have a meeting every 2 weeks. I call Dive Tribe with my company. And we get together, and there's usually about 20 of us on a live video call just like this, and we talk about sub stuff. So this would be a great topic to bring up just as an icebreaker. What is, in their opinion, because there's a lot of guys who served, the most accurate depiction of submarine life? That would be really cool.
Yeah, we have somebody in our circle who's a retired submariner, Greg Oldman. So we should ask him.
Yeah. And obviously, you could probably break it down, modern versus, historical. I know Das Boot was very accurate, almost uncomfortably so in many parts.
That's a great movie. Speaking of Das Boot, there's a little trivia. Apparently, it just comes to mind because I've been watching it recently on one of the channels. Is there's a new Indiana Jones movie coming out, and so one of the streaming services has been playing the old Indiana Jones. And the first one, Raiders of the Lost Ark, where he's riding on the submarine that they use to take the Ark to the island.
Right, yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Apparently the story is they kind of stole that submarine prop from the Das Boot people, kind of without telling them for a day.
Well, it was there anyway. Who cares?
There, yeah. Apparently they were filming at the same time or close to the same time, I think. And so Spielberg needed a submarine to do the shoot and had issues getting one. And they said, hey, there was one from the Das Boat. We'll just borrow that for a bit.
It helps the budget a lot when you don't need to build a full-scale replica of a submarine.
Yeah. All right. Well, Bob, it's been great having you on. This has really been a fascinating talk. Even though I've met you a couple times, I've still learned a bunch of new stuff and some interesting things. And I'm also mesmerized by that picture behind you. What the heck is that?
It's some artwork. I don't know if I even have the artist's name on there, but I picked that up online. I'm just a submarine nut. I love everything submarine, and when it starts turning steampunky, kind of like that, then I really get my fires stoked.
All right. So as I mentioned before, you have a website. What's your website?
NautilusDrydocks.com. It's as easy as that.
Fantastic. And how do we find you on YouTube?
RC Sub Guy. Basically, if you search for RC Submarine, I will pop up. The benefit of being active in this little tiny hobby is that I am king of this anthill, at least in this little corner of North America. So if you're looking for anything RC Submarine, if you search for it on YouTube, it'll probably pull me up.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I dare everybody to go take a look at his works, the website and YouTube channel. Some neat stuff. I like when you throw your sub in your pool or something just for a quick run. That's always get a kick out of that.
That's the only way I could justify having a pool. It's a test facility for work.
Yes.
It's a tax write-off.
So, Bob, any last words before we go?
No, just I guess if you haven't checked out the hobby, I recommend doing it. It's absolutely fascinating. I really love it. Even if you don't end up going into it, there's some amazing videos out there that'll keep you occupied for as long as you want to go down that rabbit hole. It's much better than cat videos on YouTube. And if anybody is interested at all, I encourage them to reach out to me. I would love to hear from you and bring more people into this little world underneath the ocean.
Fantastic. Well, on that note, I think we will surface from this voyage, and we will see you next time. You got anything to say, Terry, before we bug out?
No, I found this super interesting. I felt like kind of the outsider because I've never had a submarine, but I've been interested in it. So I appreciate the education, and I'm a little bit more I get inspired to get my own thing going now. So
there you go. Yeah. There you go. I'd love to help you out. Let me know.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's some good questions, Terry. Thanks for giving an outsider view.
Yeah.
I may be a little too close to the subject to ask good questions. All right, on that note, thanks for listening, everybody, and we will see you next time.
Later.
Please visit our website at rcroundtable.com, where you can send us comments and suggestions or listen to our other great podcasts, where you will also find links to our iTunes and social media sites. Thanks for listening.